Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Craft Parenting Podcast, the podcast about two Cincinnati craft beer lovers with a parenting problem. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Joe Ludwig, and with me is my lovely wife and co-host, Caroline. How's it going?
I just want to let you guys know that I am currently doing the hard work of this podcast. I had to wake Joe up twice so we could record tonight. He might only remember one of those times, but I had to wake him up twice so we could actually record an episode for you, our lovely listener.
Yeah, I'm trying to get ahead of things, and we keep falling asleep. I think I mentioned that in a previous episode, but I don't know because we're ahead, and I have to edit things, and things might go out of order. Who knows? But according to this, according to my notes, this is episode 98, and we are going to talk about my favorite beer style. Not really. The West Coast IPA, or IPAs, India Pale Ales, specifically the West Coast style. We have three local beers, local to Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Two of them say West Coast. One of them just says IPA, though. I think you'll have to correct me if it's not labeled as a West Coast. I don't know what. If it's not a West Coast, is it a New England? Are all...
Well, when the description says brewed with a nod to the Pacific, I'm pretty sure that means West Coast. But we'll get there when we get there.
Okay.
We got beers. We're going to talk about the beers.
We're going to talk about the beers.
Hit the button.
Well, but first we're going to talk about the coffee and the buy me a coffee.
I like me coffee. I also like me some beers.
So you should buy us a coffee.
Por favor.
Hey everyone, Joe Ludwig here with the one and only Caroline.
Hey!
Before we get to the main topic of today's episode, we wanted to pause briefly and tell you about how you can support the show.
So if you enjoy listening to the podcast and reading our blog posts every week, then you now have the opportunity to support the show through Buy Me a Coffee. Here's what you need to know. It's super easy to do. You don't have to set up an account to contribute. You have options. Send us a one-time donation or sign up as a member to contribute on a monthly or yearly basis. Plus, you can unlock exclusive content.
To learn more about how you can support the Craft Parenting Podcast through Buy Me a Coffee, click the link in the show notes. And now, back to the show. We're back.
Thanks, us.
You should buy us a coffee. Go into the link in the show notes, as Past Me said, and buy us a coffee or buy us a beer. But the platform is called Buy Me a Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to buy us a coffee. You can buy us a beer. And there's no obligation to continue. You can just do one and done. You can do a monthly thing like some other platforms out there. We went with this platform, so you can choose. You can do monthly or just once.
It's choose your own adventure.
Yeah. And there are some perks as well. So you can go to buymeacoffee/craft parenting and check that out. But we have a beer in front of us. So what are we drinking?
We are currently drinking a 13 below West Coast IPA. It is 7.3% ABV and 74 IBUs, which are made up and don't matter. Their description is, our West Coast India Pale Ale has a big hoppy aroma and flavor. It has a slight malt backbone with typical West Coast hops, brewed with Simcoe, Amarillo, and Cascade hops.
And it's super fresh.
So fresh.
This was filled March 23rd. So I don't know if that's super fresh.
It's less than a month old.
It's within a month.
As of this recording.
It's not fresh enough.
Shift beer. It's not fresh enough for shift beers.
Well, yeah. I mean, this beer, I just wanted to try. Like I said, I jokingly said this was my favorite style. However, I almost never get IPAs because I I don't prefer them. And if I'm spending now $7 on a beer, I'm going to get something that I like. I
Yeah.
don't want to, waste my money on something that I don't like. $7 is a lot. But I was very pleasantly surprised by this one. The color is really dark. I would consider this super dark for an IPA.
Yeah, this is probably a bit too dark for an IPA. But I'm fine with it.
It's copper colored. Very similar to like a red lager. Maybe like a Killian's or something in that nature.
Mm-hmm.
So it's copper. You drink it and you get it's very hop forward. But yeah, the color does throw you off. It's not a ton of hop. It's not as much hop as it could be, I guess, is what I wrote. It's just enough hop where if you don't really like the bitterness,
Mm-hmm.
if you're used to like the maltiness, it has the hops, but the malts kind of balance it out, which makes it drinkable for someone
who's not a huge fan of IPAs.
Yeah, so I would call this like a very good gateway IPA.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in your face. IBUs are pretty up there, though. It's comparable to the other ones.
But the IBUs are made up and don't matter.
Yeah, they don't matter. So, yeah, if you go to 13 Below, one, say hi to us.
Because we're probably there.
We might be there, yeah. Two, try it. See if you like it. They have other great stuff, too. I mean, they do a wide variety of beer down there.
Mm-hmm. Similar to West Side, they do a lot of more traditional brews than cakey pastry, all the fruit. Though I'm still like a huge fan of, I'm not going to be able to find it. West Side has a beer and it's called, it's got apricot, peach, and the fruits with the fur. Because that is like the most trendy name for a beer that they have ever done.
They announced it on April Fool's Day, and it was an actual beer.
Yes, because it's on their website still. I would like to drink it. But yeah, they did announce it on April Fool's Day. I don't even care if it's just a one-time beer. I love it.
But speaking of West Side, we are both wearing West Side shirts.
Because...
Oh.
West Side, West Side. Yeah. So I don't know which shirt you're wearing. Because I can't... Is it just a West Side shirt or does it have something on the back? It might be a Mug Club shirt.
It's my Mug Club shirt.
Yeah. And I am wearing... That's the ice maker. I am wearing the West Side. West Side, West Side.
Yep,
shirt.
That's right. So let's talk about IPAs.
Yes. Let's.
Specifically, the West Coast IPA.
Yeah. So this is a style that has been around since before 1815 because it was widespread in England by 1815. And the description per Wikipedia is a hoppy beer style within the broader category of pale ale. So it grew in popularity, notably as an export beer shipped to India, because it was under control of the British East India Company until 1858. So the 18th century, early days of India Pale Ales, they were lightly hopped and quite different from the ones that we have today. It was mostly brewed with coke-fired malt, which was less roasty and smoky than traditionally roasted barley. So that made a paler beer. So the first kind of variety was an October beer, which was very popular among the landed gentry. So all your fancy landholders out in England. and they brewed it domestically. And once it was brewed, it was intended to cellar for 2 years.
Oh boy.
So
Not very fresh.
controversial opinion time. All these people wanting their freshy boy IPAs are doing it wrong. Your IPA is a true IPA if you've aged it for 2 years in your cellar. Because that is the way it was intended.
If you have any comments about this, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Raging Up.
We will have a very lively discussion with you over on Twitter via the @RagingHop handle. So it was first exported by George Hodgson's Bow Brewery, and the beer became popular among the East India Company traders. And so ships would export this beer to India, which benefited exceptionally from conditions of the voyage and was apparently highly regarded among its consumers in India. So this isn't just a beer that aged in a cellar for 2 years. This is a beer that aged on a boat that probably saw lots of hot and lots of cold and extreme temperature fluctuations, which is like the complete opposite of what you want to do when you're aging something usually. Though, I mean, you'd probably get like a very oaky beer because it would pick up from the cask that it was in to get transported.
Yeah, they didn't have stainless steel.
Yeah, because I know like when you are aging beer, and Marco, feel free to correct me on this, different brewers have different opinions on how they want to age their beers. And some of it depends on the beer style as well. So when they're barrel aging a beer, some brewers will choose to put the barrel somewhere where it's going to stay similar temperatures all year long, or however long it is that they're aging it. While other people will be like, I'm going to put this right by the dock door. So it gets real hot, it gets real cold, the wood expands, the wood contracts. So that beer is going in and out of those porous wood fibers, getting as much of that flavor as possible. It just kind of depends on what you're going for as far as how you want your barrel to sit.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's interesting that they had to ship it, and it took them 2 years to do.
Well, I don't think it took them 2 years to get to India, but the first iterations of this, it were intended to be cellared for 2 years.
Oh, so they did it on purpose.
Yes.
Oh.
Whenever it was at home, but then it would ship and get wonky aged whilst in voyage across the world.
Okay.
I wonder if there are casks of this in the bottom of the ocean. They might be really salty by now, though.
Yeah, I think the ocean would dilute the beer by now.
Well, it's like the I want to say there were some bottles of wine that were, quote, rescued from the Titanic that went up for auction and sold for like ridiculous amounts of money. And somebody actually popped one of the bottles, and it's like, it's vinegar now. Like, this is not wine. This is gross. It's worth more with the cap on than it was after I uncapped it, because nobody wants to drink this.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe next April Fool's Day we will see like ocean aged beer. Could be a thing.
Well, there you go. Yeah, so West Coast IPAs, does it say why it's called a West Coast IPA?
I haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay, well, continue.
This is just like, because Wikipedia just gets into like nuances of specific breweries and exporting to and from India. And how like, well, this one company had the monopoly on it until other companies started getting into it as well. I mean, we can really dig into it if you want to.
So it was a very lucrative business, shipping beer.
I mean, yeah, you're shipping.
IPAs.
Well, I mean, it's the problem that we have. It's it's avoiding the problem that we have nowadays where we get all of these shipping containers that are sent to the U.S., but then like the United States is shipping out smaller items than we are receiving in. So we have all these cargo containers that we don't have anything to do with unless we're going to ship empty cargo containers across the ocean to fill them up again. So if you're going to India to get spices and resources and stuff, you want to have that ship as full on the way there as it is on the way back to hopefully make money on both legs of your trip, because you're making money selling stuff when you get there, and then you're spending some of that money to fill your ship back up, and then you're selling all of that stuff when you get back home. So your goal is to make as much money as possible with each leg of your trip.
That makes sense. It's like this game that I have on my phone where it's called Pocket Trains.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to ship stuff and do routes and stuff.
Oh, yeah, like pocket planes. That was a thing for a while.
Yeah.
I think Tiny Tower is still a thing, too.
I don't think it is. I think it's just the trains. That's a fun game. Because you have to do logistics and you have to try to get maximize your cargo as much as possible.
Yeah.
To get your maximum profit. Okay, so this is more the color than I thought it should be.
Yeah, more straw colored.
Yeah. So this one, oh, jeez, okay.
Well, as mentioned previously, this table is very long and my arms are very short. The other day we were eating dinner and I asked Joe to hand me something and he was like, well, can't you reach it? And I stretch my arm out and I'm still like 2 feet away from the object. And I'm like, no, my arms are short. That's why I asked you to pass it to me.
Did we say what the ABV was of the 13 Below?
We did.
Oh, we did.
And it was 7.3%. One.
We'll see if we beat the Shift Beers record this week.
I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that we were in like the top 5 longest episodes of Shift Beers ever. I won't say what number we were because then that ruins Truth Beer and Podsequence's poll. But that was actually with them cutting some stuff out.
They cut out a lot, actually.
Yeah, so like that could have been like a way
We took a lot
episode.
of breaks too, like more breaks than Truth Beer Pod.
We did take a few breaks. I also got locked out because I forgot what the code was. I was like, I'll remember what this is. And then like halfway through my trip to the bathroom, I was like, what was that code again? I don't know.
I don't think they told me the code.
There was another way to get in. I snuck in. So now we have a Truth, Marco's drink of choice from Rheingeist Brewing in our cups.
Never heard of it.
2. It is 7.2% ABV and 75 IBUs. Their description: rare are moments of truth when you've struck the last match, belting out tunes with your friends, staring deep into the campfire, times when you feel infinite. Our truth is found in the scintillating brilliance of hops, brewed with a nod to the Pacific. Hops sizzle with tropical fruit aroma, grapefruit and mango notes, and a dry finish. A nice, like, white foamy head. Lil hazy, but not like super hazy.
Very hop forward.
Hop forward, and much, much lighter. This is more of a straw color versus
it's not as balanced. It's just very bitter.
Mm-hmm.
Good, refreshing. That's what I've, like I said, I haven't drank an IPA in years, really.
Well, not like a full IPA.
Like a full a pint. I mean, I've had sips, I've tried this, I've tried that, but like a full pint, it's been a while. But the one thing I will say about IPAs is that they are refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
And as the weather kind of heats up, during the day it gets hot and then at night it gets cool. This is a really refreshing beer. And it's different too because I do tend to drink the same thing because, I've already said why, but it is nice to kind of switch it up. It's not my favorite style, but I do appreciate it.
Yeah, like I'm not a huge fan of how it like continues to linger on your tongue for a little while. I like to have my palate cleared after a little bit, and it just kind of is always hoppy when I'm drinking IPAs. But it's still a style that I can get behind and will enjoy from time to time.
Yeah, and like we mentioned before, it doesn't say West Coast, but it does say not to the Pacific in the description. Yeah. So I think it's safe to say that this is a West Coast style.
It definitely is not a New England style IPA.
Yeah, I don't know if,
I don't really know if West Coast IPAs was like a style when Truth was a thing.
Yeah.
I think that was still when it was just like IPAs, and then eventually like New England IPAs came out, and so it was West Coast versus East Coast.
Yeah, I think that's correct. That's why I was like, is there something in the middle? Like, is West Coast different than just an IPA that is different than a New England? I don't think that's necessarily true.
I mean, we can get into that in a little bit. But like early IPAs were only slightly higher in alcohol than most of the beers of the day and would not have been considered strong ales. But because they were so well fermented, they had very few residual sugars, so the beer was a lot more hoppy. So because they weren't as malty, that's when you were getting more of the hops. So like the 13 Below beer is probably a little bit more malty than what what I would consider a true IPA to be. It's still good. It's a well-balanced beer, but the malts are kind of balancing out the hops a little too much.
I'm okay with it though.
Oh, I'm totally fine with it. It's a good gateway IPA for like hey, give this a try a few times, and then let me throw a little something a little bit stronger on your palate.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's amazing the difference between the 13 Below and the Rheingeist.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the taste and the color and everything, that's crazy. But I can understand kind of, the clientele is different. 13 Below, it's kind of West Side. People are used to going to dive bars.
And they're like, what's your Bud Light?
Yeah. What's the closest thing you have?
Yeah.
So,
are they the ones that have the beer that's called Closest Thing?
I think so.
If I Google it, I lose where I am in my doc, but that's fine.
Well, continue. I have to use the...
Well, now I'm going to look that up. Yeah. 13 Below is the one that has the beer called Closest Thing because it's hard when I have to hit the buttons myself. West side, west side. And this table is so long. Because you got all those West Siders being like, hey, what's the closest thing you got to a Bud Light? I know we've talked about this before, but there have been many a times where we have gone to a brewery and Joe's mom has said, can I get a Bud Light? And they're like, no. And she's like, what's the closest thing that you have to a Bud Light? And they give her like their Kolsch or their Pilsner. And she's like, I'll just have a water. Cause she's not a fan. She knows what she's about. So, talking to myself, while IPAs were the ones that were formulated to survive long voyages better than other styles at the time, they also shipped a lot of porters to India and California. So by 1860s, IPAs were widely brewed in England, and they were much more attenuated and highly hopped than porters and other ales. So they had less sugar, making them a little more dry and the hops to kick out a little bit more. The term India was dropped somewhere in the late 19th century, but pale ales retain the features of early IPAs. And there were IPAs brewed in American, Australian, and Canadian breweries. Canada. And they were similar to the IPAs in England. So we're going to skip the history of the UK and we're just going to go to the United States because USA. Because in the late 20th century, brewers began looking for old recipes that had fallen out of fashion. And there was a Ballantine IPA that had been made in the United States since 1890. And they used that as their inspiration because they wanted to showcase American hops. So they were going to showcase Cascade and Chinook hops, which are grown in Yakima, Washington. So, I mean, really the first American IPAs would be West Coast IPAs then, because the hops are West Coast hops.
Okay. That's probably why they call it that then.
Yeah.
Some breweries do have an American IPA. I'm assuming that is almost synonymous with a West Coast IPA.
Yeah, I mean, because it says that the boom for IPAs spread down the West Coast and eventually across the whole U.S. And that I don't know what the date is for this, but they estimate that over 40% of craft beer brewed in the U.S. can be classified as an IPA. Actually, that is from a 2022 article.
Wow. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many different styles.
Yeah, and I mean, like the New England IPA wasn't invented until 2004 in Vermont. Which is that one's your typical New England IPA has juicy citrus and floral flavors with an emphasis on the hop aroma, but it has a low bitterness. Mm-hmm. And they're very smooth and are very hazy because they also call it they're a hazy IPA.
Yeah, we're going to try to do a New England.
Oops, all New Englands.
Show, yeah.
So West Coast IPAs, they only have one sentence for it in this whole thing. They're known for being low in malt content, very clear and dry with a focus on the hops.
I would say that is accurate.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very, very hoppy. Very, very little malt flavoring.
Yeah.
I mean, they obviously use it, but it's just very hop forward.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the difference is between all the hops, but I know, IPA drinkers, they go all out and they're very particular. I want this hop. I want that hop.
I want my Freshie Boy.
Yeah.
If it is more than 2 weeks old, I will not drink it.
Which,
I mean, I would hope that the truth would be pretty new.
March 16.
Sweet.
It says, get your green on.
I mean, March 16th, that's the day before St. Patrick's Day.
Get your green. I don't even think it says on.
It might not. Sometimes they just decide to put fun messages in with the date code.
Yeah, March 16th.
Yeah.
So the 13 below is fresher than the Rheingeist Truth.
I mean, but that's still we got that Rheingeist at a Kroger. So.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that. Okay.
What is it, 2 months old?
February.
That's not too bad, though.
Late February.
Though controversially, Wikipedia does include the cold IPA / India Pale Lager. Because they actually call it the lager instead of just calling it a cold IPA. Because some people in the brewing community get up in arms about the term cold IPA because really it's a lager. It's not an ale. So it should be an L, not an A. Because it's a hoppy beer style inspired by the IPA. But it's fermented with a lager yeast strain. at a lower, hence colder temperature.
Yeah, they cold crash it and then they lager it. So it takes longer to make.
Yeah.
In theory, with modern equipment, maybe not so much, but in theory,
And it's
lagering does take longer.
It's going to be a more of a crispy boy, but still have that super hoppiness to it.
I have tried one, I think, but I haven't had like a full pint of it.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's an interesting style for sure.
Well, it's part of like the
We'll try to do a cold IPA
if we can find them.
Yeah. Show.
Yeah, I mean it's like the German Irish lager that Westside does. It's just playing around with beer recipes and saying, well, I'm going to combine this usual recipe with a different yeast strain. So I'm going to change how I ferment it and see what happens. I mean, there are no real rules for beer. There's just guidelines for styles. So as long as it contains hops, malt, yeast, and water, and is fermented for some period of time, it's beer. It's just a matter of whether or not it falls under a traditional style guideline.
You're talking about like competitions and stuff.
Yeah. It's like when you enter a brewing competition and every year they enter Little Kings as something else. Like it's a pale ale this year and they'll put it in as a cream ale next year. Because there's like 4 different ways that you could classify it if you argue your case. And then because it's different from everything else that's been entered into that category, it wins.
Yeah, competitions are hard because it's subjective.
Well, and
obviously, it's subjective.
Yeah, well, like very few people that I have listened to podcasts talk about judging beer events. They're like, yeah, it gets to a point where you've got 6 beers in front of you that taste almost identical.
Mm-hmm.
And you're picking out one of them because, well, this has something interesting in it that might not actually be to style, but it's something that you can pick out from the 5 other beers that are on the table.
Yeah, like as a judge, like you have to decide, are you going to pick the beer that is closest to the style?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going to pick the beer that stands out?
And when you've been drinking the same beers, like 20 beers that taste almost virtually identical, it's hard to say, well, this one's better than that one when they're like almost the same when you taste them. But when this one's got a little bit something in it, oh, that one, maybe I'm going to go for that one because I can differentiate it from everything else.
Yeah, I mean, but then there's the whole marketing aspect too, like the cold IPA. It's new, it's different. You know, there is like a psychology to it.
Yeah. I mean, if you do it well enough and talk loudly enough about it, you get your own style made. And that's how Midwest Fruit Tart came to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all
they made a lot of it. What they made was really good, and they just kept talking about it. And now it's a style.
Yeah. Just make it up.
Yeah. And now they're like, it's not beer. It was beer, but now it's not. We've bastardized it so much.
Oh, yeah.
We should hang out with Brett one day. I feel like that'd be lots of fun.
I'm sure he's busy.
Yeah.
Talking to Jim Cook and the Gnome and Michael D. Morgan.
Yeah. So we have a new drink in our glass. And this is a West Coast IPA from Westside Brewing Company in Westwood, Ohio. It is 7.2% ABV and 61 IBUs. Their description: an American craft brewing classic, the West Coast IPA showcases assertive American hops. Our version is the color of orange marmalade with a white head. Aromas of pine, citrus, and peaches leap from the glass. Clean, sweet malt flavor supports the hops, and there's plenty of the lingering bitterness that's a staple of the style. Hops used both in the kettle and for dry hopping were Amarillo, Cascade, Citra, and Columbus. So this is a seasonal beer. It might be a new style for them, because I can't remember them having a West Coast IPA before.
In cans, I think it is new. I'm sure they had it on draft.
But we also don't get IPAs from West Side that much.
No, but
I'm too busy drinking all of their milk stout and peanut butter milk stout, and
we went to West Side the other day to specifically get beer for the party.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we need to get Dippa for Dippa Josh, otherwise he won't show up.
Yep,
it's in his contract.
We're gonna leave Dippa beer under our pillows, and then Dippa Josh will show up.
Yeah. I don't know what present he leaves, and I don't know if I want to know what present he leaves.
He just takes the Dippa and leaves.
I think he just leaves, instead of having bedhead in the morning, you have amazing hair in the morning. That is what Dippa Josh leaves. Whenever he lets his hair down, it is a gorgeous mane.
Yeah. Really, we just set it out we're gonna set it out on the eve of the party,
mm-hmm.
like the 6-pack, and I don't know. It may turn into a Tippa.
It could. Ooh, that Tippa was real good and real dangerous. Isn't their Tippa 10%?
Oh yeah, it's definitely double digits.
It's so yummy though.
Is there anything more than a Tippa? Is there a?
So.
I know there's a quad, like a Belgian style quad.
I feel like we had
Imperial probably.
So their Tippa is 12.5% ABV. And it had 2 rounds of dry hopping. But it was so good. That is such a high ABV. That was why we got so messed up that night. I feel like maybe it was the Tippa where it's it's triple hopped because it's your initial hop and then there's 2 rounds of dry hopping. So it's just all of the things and all of the sugars for all of the yeasts.
Yeah. It was very sticky and smooth, and that's the opposite. Mm-hmm. It was kind of it was definitely, I prefer that over what I'm drinking now.
Yeah.
Which we should talk about. You said it was a West Coast IPA, 7.2%, 61 IBUs.
It's a little more clear than the Truth.
Oh, jeez. I would say
it's about the same color.
I would say it's darker than the Truth.
A little bit darker, but definitely more clear. I can kind of see Joe's face through the glass. I could not see Joe's face through the glass with the Truth. At least that's my truth.
I don't think I was looking at you through my glass.
I wasn't either. I was looking at my fingers, but I can see my fingers real clearly. So I can kind of see your face.
Yeah, okay.
My taste in music is your face.
This is even more. So I think that there are different hops.
Yeah.
In the West Side versus the Rheingeist. I can definitely taste the difference. It's still very bitter, but I can taste the difference.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the fun thing about taking 3 beers that are the same style, quote unquote, and drinking them one right after the other. Because every time we've done this, it's been 3 or 4 or 6 very different beers. We can say this beer is slightly similar to this, but they're not the same. Because when you have them side by side without any breaks, that's when you get all those little nuances.
Yeah, does Rheingeist say what hops they use?
They do not in their description. They just give you tasting notes.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could look it up.
Yeah, so that's the thing. In IPA, it's just you use these hops, you bitter the beer.
Mm-hmm.
You make it bitter. It doesn't necessarily matter. Ideally, there are hops from the West Coast, though, right?
Yeah. So this, according to the beer connoisseur, Truth uses Centennial, Simcoe, Citra, and Amarillo hops.
Citra, Amarillo. What were the other ones?
Simcoe and Centennial.
Okay, so West Side uses Amarillo, Citra, so those two are the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then it uses Cascade and Columbus.
Yeah. So half the hops are the same. But I mean, you also don't know what the percentage is.
Right, you don't. And it's amazing. Like you were saying, like you can drink 3, quote, West Coast IPAs and they're just so different.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the difference between the West Side and the Rheingeist, because West Side is very traditional, usually.
Yeah.
So you would think, it would be very similar to like a Truth, but and I'm not an IPA guy, but I can taste the difference.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that we could do this differently is if we had 3 glasses in front of us. We did like 2 sips of each beer, and then we drank all of the beers versus the drink one that we do. But even still, I think we're really good at telling what's what.
Yeah. And the 13 Below, like I said, I think their goal was to do like a gateway thing.
Yes, because
I don't want to
some
speak
West
for
Siders.
them. Yeah, I don't want to speak for them, but I think that's what they were trying to do. Make it more
palatable,
approachable.
Yeah, because there are quite a few interesting dive bars on the West Side. Gnome does a dive bar Wednesday now. We should give him the name of some dive bars on the West Side. They're not necessarily ones that we've been to. There are a few that we have been to. You'd be like, hey, you should check some of these places out.
I mean, what's the criteria of a dive bar?
The floor's a little sticky. You don't want the lights to be on too bright because you really don't want to see what's going on in the corners. Sometimes their adherence to the indoor smoking ban in Ohio is questionable. Though my favorite this was where I used to work. There was a machinist who was older than dirt. We couldn't wait for him to retire so we could change the way that all of his parts were made, because he was very much set in his ways, and this is the way that I'm going to do things. And it's like, this is not the way that you should be doing things, but please just retire so you can leave. He would walk 2 steps away from his machine, stick a cigarette and light it, and he would still be like 100 feet from the door. So he'd just be smoking the whole way to the door because he couldn't wait the extra like 30 seconds to get to the door. But no, because like there's some dive bars that I knew because of people whose children that I babysat, where they're like, oh yeah, like that smoking ban thing is a thing, but we can still smoke at our bar. And then like 2 months later, yeah, we're not allowed to smoke inside anymore because they got fined like 3 times because people snitched on them. That is some.
I wouldn't.
The snitching isn't West Side though. Like we really don't snitch.
Oh, if someone was smoking inside, I would snitch.
Oh, I would too though, because that was like we went to Tennessee, and we go to a restaurant. This was like
2011.
It was 2011, so maybe it was like 8 or 9 years since the smoking ban had been passed, because it had been a long while since I had been in a restaurant and had gotten asked the question, smoking or non. And somebody asks us, smoking or non, and without skipping a beat, I said non. And And I was like, oh, I do still have that muscle memory. Okay. Please, as far away as possible. I would like to taste my food.
Yeah.
And not cough up a lung while I am here.
Yeah, we have asthma.
A little bit.
Different types of asthma. I have smoke-induced asthma, apparently. We went to Schützenfest years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to drink a beer. This is at Koping, Schützenfest. Typically it's in July. I think they recently moved it to June. Which, shame on them. I think it's like the same weekend as Schwabenfest or something.
And we picked that weekend for Schwabenfest because usually the weather is great. Schützenfest is usually so hot. That's probably why they moved it.
Yeah, they started moving it after the pandemic. So they canceled it the year of the pandemic and they moved it to Father's Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure it's Father's Day weekend. But Koping is it's not affiliated with Donauschwaben, which is what we participate in.
Yeah. It's been described to me as a Catholic club with a German problem.
Mm-hmm. And every year they have the Schützenfest, which the whole point of Schützenfest is
they crown their new king.
The new quote king, yeah.
By shooting a wooden eagle off of a post.
With the BB gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have seen it. We have been in the beer garden when it has happened. I don't fully understand it. Y'all do you.
Yeah, so they just they take turns, I think. Like you
have like a team of 5 or you have a team of X amount of people.
I don't think you have a team.
You do.
Oh,
Well,
you do?
See, yeah, you have like a little team, but like you know who in that team is the one that's going for the king.
I don't know. There's a lot of politics involved with that.
So many politics.
Yeah, we typically used to dance at Schützenfest. It was part of the summer fall tour or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Where was I going with that? So one year, I think it was very early in our relationship.
Yeah, it was probably like 2010-ish.
Yeah, so we just got finished dancing. It was Friday night. Schützenfest Koping has a beautiful beer garden.
Mm-hmm.
Big, tall trees.
And it's right next to the shelter house as opposed to Germania's beer garden, which is very well removed from the shelter house. It's like I didn't know that Germania had a beer garden until we had been going there for like 8 years.
Yeah, neither did I. Usually Germania, I'll get to Germania in a second. But Schützenfest is typically in July.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hot. But we typically dance Friday night at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whatever. So it's dark.
Right before the sun starts going down.
Yeah, so it's starting to cool off. So we decided to stay, have a beer, and talk with friends. And we sat in the beer garden, covered in trees. That was also probably part of my problem.
Not a lot of wind.
I'm allergic to trees.
I am allergic to anything that's green and grows or has fur.
Yep. So that was probably part of my problem. And then, of course, it's all outside. So everyone is smoking. Like packs and packs of smoking. Cigar smoke, cigarette smoke. This was before vaping. So no one was vaping. Everyone was doing either cigars or cigarette.
No cotton candy smoke in the air.
Right. So I'm drinking, you're drinking. We're having a good time. We're having conversations with friends. And then I just have a coughing fit. And I can't stop. I'm having like breathing issues. Mm-hmm. And you had to drive home. And it was kind of...
And then I had to teach you how to get down from an asthma-related event.
You almost took me to the ER because I was having an asthma attack, which I've never had before.
Well, you were having a panic attack on top of the asthma attack.
Yeah, because I was having trouble breathing.
Yeah, which is very much understandable. And if you haven't experienced an asthma attack before, panicking is usually your go-to when that starts happening.
Yeah. So I haven't had that before. It happened to me before.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't happened since.
It has, well, I want to say I've
Not-
probably
not-
made you use your inhaler a few times, but
Not
not that many.
Not that bad, at least.
You haven't
right?
used your inhaler as much as I've used mine in the last
But
few years.
I almost went to the ER because I was just coughing and
And I couldn't get you down.
gasping and coping. At the time I lived with my parents, who lived in Mumford Heights. And that's a good 30-minute drive.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Because there isn't really a good way.
Because you took the highway. I remember you driving on the highway. So it was a good 30 minutes, and I remember sitting in my mom and dad's living room, or family room, like still trying to catch my breath,
Mm-hmm.
like 30, 45 minutes later.
Yeah, the whole time I'm attempting to coach you on how to breathe normal again.
So yeah, smoking is no bueno for me. Not when I'm around it for a long time, because I was probably around it for a good hour and a half.
Yeah. Versus me, if I do anything strenuous when it's green outside. Like, yay, life.
Yeah, smoking no bueno.
Yeah, I remember
I'm glad they did the ban or whatever.
Yeah, well, because I was talking to somebody the other day. Like I had a great aunt who her son moved across the country and she could not fly across the country because she could not sit through a 7-hour flight without smoking. So they had to drive across the country so they could visit her son. And she would literally smoke a pack a day, if not 2 packs a day.
Is this your relative?
Yes. This is my mom's aunt. It's my great aunt. I said it was my great aunt.
I thought you said you were talking to someone.
So I was talking to somebody about that because they had talked about we're trying to get a coworker to go from 2 cigarette breaks a day to 1 cigarette break to slowly get himself better. And I was like, when they peeled the wood paneling off the walls as they were renovating the house after my great aunt and uncle passed away, there was a definite difference between the areas of the kitchen where there was wood paneling and when there was not wood paneling. It was 2 different colors of paint. Because it's super gross. But my great uncle asked me at dinner one night, because it was before we knew that I had asthma, and I was having a coughing fit, and he looked at me and he's like, "That's a smoker cough. Are you smoking?" And I was like, "No, if I smoked, this would be 10 times worse." Smoking is not an option for me because then I really won't be able to breathe. And I enjoy breathing. I do not appreciate breathing as much as I should. When you get a cold and you can't breathe through your nose and you're like, all of those times that I could breathe and didn't have to think about it, I took it for granted.
Yeah.
This really digressed from IPAs.
Yeah. I don't know how we got here, but sure.
I don't know either.
Is it because our executive producer kicked me too much?
Probably.
He does that now. He was hitting himself. He started hitting me. I said, "Do not hit me or I'm leaving." And then he's like, "Okay, I'll hit myself." And he just started giggling. He wasn't hitting himself hard.
Yeah.
But he was just hitting himself. And he started giggling. I'm like, "No, stop it."
Yeah, he likes to kick me, headbutt me, smack me. I'm really surprised that he has not given me a black eye yet. Because there have been a few times where I was like, this is the time I'm going to wake up in the morning and have to explain to people that Joe does not abuse me. It is my 2-year-old son who did this.
I mean,
I love him so much.
He tried. He tried to do that to me. He kicked me a couple times. I said, "Do not kick me or I'm leaving." And he stopped.
Yeah. Well, because I have actually left.
Oh, I
and
have
then he's
too.
like, where are you going? And I'm like, honey, I'm setting boundaries. I love you, but I am setting boundaries of what I will accept as rational behavior.
And he doesn't understand. He's not awake. He's not there.
He really is not.
He's just fighting it. And at the very peak edge of him about to fall asleep, like...
That's when he's his worst. And Lily's the same way.
Yeah.
Because she started, like, just, like, bouncing her foot on my side. And I'm like, hun, no. And I pushed her foot off, like, 10 times. And I was like, hun, no. We ain't playing this game. I'm about to leave. And then 30 seconds later, she's out. After the last time I shoved her leg off me.
Yeah. Kids, man.
They don't know what they want. And they fight sleep so much.
That's the stage we're in.
Yeah, I got them both to nap today, though, in their own beds.
Yeah, how'd you do that?
Elliot put himself to bed, basically. I changed his diaper. I set him in his bed. The light was off. The door was mostly open. I go to wash my hands and go to the bathroom. And I go downstairs and I'm like, oh, hey, where's Elliot? Well, he was upstairs with you. Oh, yeah, let me go check on him. He's just laying in his bed. So I just like turn on the noise machine and close the door. And then I checked him on the monitor every once in a while and he hadn't moved. And then all of a sudden he's not on the monitor. We standing at the top of the stairs. I'm like, okay, let me just sit in your bed with you for 10 minutes. And then he just conks. Because Mama's here. I can go to sleep now.
All right. So let's close this up. Is there anything else you wanted to say about IPAs, specifically the West Coast variety of IPA?
If you're not aging your IPA for 2 years, you're doing it wrong.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Pew, 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 pew. Shots fired.
Well, that does it for this week's show. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Craft Parenting Podcast. And on the YouTubes, we are about to approach 10,000 views.
Woohoo! And you have a new YouTube video that you should watch. Well, that everybody should watch.
I recently did a YouTube video trying to figure out how to edit, trying to figure out how to do equipment. I talk about self-driving cars.
Listen to Zap.
Just the different levels of automation. There are 5, but technically 6 because it starts at level 0.
Mm-hmm.
Levels of automation. So it's another segment that I'm trying out called The Future Freaks Me Out. It's just me reading like articles about technology.
While Motion City soundtrack plays quietly in the background.
I wasn't going to say why it's called that, but I think you just outed why it's called that.
Yeah. Hey, I introduced you to them, so
yeah, we have a YouTube, and on all of the platforms that we're on, you can find us at Craft Parenting Podcast. You can also get a hold of us via email, which is craftparentingpodcast@gmail.com.
if you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice, and share the show. It's what helps our show grow.
And all this information is available on our website, which is www.craftparentingpodcast.com.
That's where we post the show notes plus blog posts. 20
Maybe.
question marks.
Maybe. We'll see.
It's in my head. It's just not in the interwebs.
And if you want to follow me personally, I am at Craft Parenting Joe on Instagram.
And I am at Caroline Creates Crafts.
And with that, I'm Joe.
And I'm Caroline.
And we'll see you next time on the Craft Parenting Podcast.
Bye.